morning, I want to share two stories before I start and get to the substantive matter. And one of those stories I would share is an encounter I had at the gas station yesterday. While approaching the gas station, while going to purchase fuel, a gentleman came up to me, and the gentleman was extremely happy to see me, thanking me for an action I took with respect to an assistance he got with employment. And, you know, the gentleman reminded me, because, of course, as an assemblyman, you deal with a number of people, and I could not recall the specific encounter. But he was saying to me that, whereas one of the opportunities recommended, he was unsuccessful, there was another opportunity that I recommended, and he was successful. And he was extremely grateful. And this was a job that, you know, some of us would take for granted. But what dawned on me at that moment was the fact that this young man was so happy for the opportunity to put food on the table of his family. And that for which we may take for granted, there are persons in this island that are really struggling and just waiting for an opportunity. And that reminded me that every single cent that we are entrusted with as public officials, we should and ought to ensure that those funds are managed prudently. The next incident I would share with you is one where a resident of mine at the hospital related to me a story where, in waiting to be administered for care, she could not help but notice someone taking to the hospital a kettle. And when they ask the person, "Where are you going with this kettle?" they say, "Well, there's no hot water, so they have their father admitted, and they are going to carry this hot water to bathe their parent." So that tells me that even within the health system, there are current challenges that requires resources. And while we are faced with significant challenges and resource shortfall in the health system at this time, there are many matters that demonstrates a lack of prudent management of the very scarce resources. Today I can tell you the Tobago Regional Health Authority, without fear of contradiction, is a graveyard ripe with corruption. Ripe with corruption. And while there are many matters that will be coming to the fore within the next couple weeks and months, there is one matter I would like to treat with today. And that matter is a matter I raised very early, and it perhaps during the election and the electioneering it got lost. But today I stand as your minority leader, and not just as your minority leader, but as a Tobagonian, son of the soil, who would not sit silently while millions of dollars are spirited away and unanswered for. Today, I want to go through chronologically the whole issue of the purchase and procurement of these ambulances, so that Tobagonians can have an appreciation for how we got here. What I'm about to say and what I reveal here today is not simply hearsay, it's not political spin, but it's cold hard facts. This is nothing short of Ambulance Gate. Ambulance Gate. A brazen, unapologetic scandal that now stands as the greatest procurement betrayal in the history of the Tobago House of Assembly. You will recall in 2023, July to be specific, the Tobago Regional Health Authority awarded a contract for ambulances under tender number PMT 01-2022. That contract awarded at that time was valued at $5.535 million, $5,535,000, and it was awarded to a company called Biomedical Technologies Limited. I want you to stay with me. So in 2023, contract awarded $5.535 million. At that time, the approved make and model of the vehicle awarded was the Isuzu model. And as you know, we all are familiar in Tobago with the Isuzu brand. Many of us have vans, trucks, etc., that are of the Isuzu, and we can vouch and speak to the quality of that vehicle. We can speak to the veracity of it and how it functions. Right? This is very known to us. It is a robust and properly suited for a mountainous terrain in Tobago. This, as folks perhaps at that time thought, would have been a transparent, clean-cut process, and therefore by now we should have, ought to have, 12 functional brand new ambulance in the system in Tobago. So we thought. But what actually happened? What actually happened? During the budget debate of 2024, the Chief Secretary stated that they would procure and commission 10 ambulances for use by the Tobago Emergency Medical Services Department at an estimated cost of $12 million. So stay with me. Award started in 2023, July, $5.535 million. And this is our Chief Secretary in his budget statement announcing to Tobagonians that the new estimated figure for the procurement of 10 ambulances was estimated at $12 million. So that was in around June of 2024. We waited because we were told we are supposed to get brand new ambulances. When we did not see any, around October, Councillor Petal Daniel Benwa asked the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection 2 questions. What is the status of the procurement of the new ambulances that we were told would be delivered by the end of September? So we were promised, you the people of Tobago, were promised that these ambulances will be delivered by 30th September 2024. When we did not see that, as a responsible minority, we asked the question, what is the status of the procurement and what is the total expenditure expected to be incurred for both purchasing? And you would recall at the same time, it is important to note, while we waited on these ambulances, the TRHA continued to lease ambulances to the tune of over $300,000 per month. My information is, based on the period 2023 to present, we have now spent over $5 million leasing 4 ambulances. It has been reduced to 2, but the overall cost, now I want you to put that into context, that the original award for the purchase of the ambulances, 12 ambulances, was $5.535 million. We have spent in just leasing 4 ambulances almost the exact figure that it was awarded to purchase. I want you to keep that into full view. So the question was asked. This is the Secretary's response. 4 ambulances have arrived in Trinidad, 3 in July and 1 in September 2024. They are currently being cleared and configured for use. They are being cleared and configured for use and currently awaiting approval from the Ministry of Health, consistent with the Emergency Ambulance Services and Emergency Medical Personnel Act Chapter 8 of 2009. It is estimated that the 4 ambulances will be operational in November because that process seems to be moving along as swiftly as it can. 8 additional ambulances have also been ordered and are being manufactured in the country of origin, and they are estimated to come in soon. So that was the Secretary in October of 2024. And you would notice that she gave an assurance that those ambulances that were already in the country, those 4, will be operational in November of 2024. So by January, we recognize, yes, we heard about some ambulance coming out. Of course, very early I raised concerns based on information that those ambulances were not fit for purpose and had a number of issues. So when we recognized the ambulances that we were promised to be in service were not in service, again in January I followed up with a question to the Secretary. So I asked her, 1, please tell us the cost per unit and the total expenditure to date for the procurement and the outfitting of the ambulances. And I also asked her, why are these ambulances not in operation at this time, and what is their current status in terms of readiness for deployment? She followed up by telling me, relating to the ambulances, the cost per unit is $1.295 million, plus an extended 3-year warranty and factory training, $88,750 per unit. There was an installation of GPS devices with an online access for the 4 ambulances at $9,400 total. Fabrication and installation of the side door of the 4 ambulances, $56,250. The supplier was paid. What you are Tobago say? The supplier was paid a total of $8.035 million to date, and this represents approximately 50% of the total cost of $16.605 million for the 12 units that were ordered. And I want to pause for the cause, and because there were a number of follow-up questions, and one of which I would want to treat with, but I want to pause for the cause because this is the first red flag in this arrangement. Why would you pay more than 50% for ambulances to which you only receive less than 50%? In other words, you are paying more, you are actually paying the supplier they are more than what you actually received. So the value of 4 ambulances, based on the price, $1.3 million, is basically about $5.6 or so million. Yet the TRHA would have made advance payments to this supplier when they did not even get all the ambulances that were supposed to be delivered. I don't know about you, but if you order something, and I want to ask the Tobagonians, if you order something, would you not wait until you receive it before you pay for it? In this instance, the TRHA made a substantial payment for ambulances that they themselves had issues with that still had to be reconfigured, and even as we speak now, only one has been placed in rotation, and that one that was placed in rotation couldn't even go up the simplest sloping hill of Tobago, the John Dial Hill. Failed, couldn't power up. Yet we have paid already, and perhaps we have even paid more since that time, $8 million of the $16.65 million. And the question we all have to ask ourselves is why? But I'll get to that in a few. So, in this instance, where we learned that 50% of your money has already been paid on these ambulances that we are now seeing are not suitable, not fit for purpose, and in fact was not the approved, tendered model, make and model. We are also, so I tried to find out from the secretary. I asked her, given the number of modification and delivery, I was concerned. Apparently they weren't concerned, but I was concerned, and I wanted to know what was the procurement process to identify this supplier of a contract of the value of over $16 million. And your secretary response was, she said, again, the procurement process, so all of a sudden she doesn't know. The procurement process happened outside of my direct input. But procurement at the TRHA includes detailing of requirements of any service or item, sending out RFPs or RFQs, having the companies provide feedback, and then finally going to the board of directors for approval to go out to approve the contract for the particular service. And I assume that this is the process that was used in this one, since that is the normal process for procurement at the TRHA. So the secretary is saying to me that she washes her hands from this process. She, as the secretary, who by law, and the law is the THA Act is quite clear, both the THA Act and the Regional Health Authority Act, Chapter 2905, Section 5.2, clearly states that in the exercise of its powers and functions, the board of the Tobago Regional Health Authority is subject to the provision of the Tobago House of Assembly Act. So, it is basically saying that subject to this section of the Constitution, which is the THA Act, that says, Section 37(1), says, where a secretary is assigned a responsibility for a division of the Assembly, he or she shall exercise general direction and control over that division. Meaning, the secretary has general direction and control over the board of the TRHA, and that is further galvanized in Section 5.1 that says, subject to subsection 2, a board shall exercise its powers and functions in accordance with specific or general directions as may be given to it by the minister, and in this case for the Tobago Regional Health Authority, by the secretary. So what this is saying in plain and simple language is that the secretary cannot divorce herself from what happens at the Tobago Regional Health Authority, because the secretary is ultimately responsible for the general direction and control of the business of the Tobago Health Authority. So let me get back to some more of the facts. So these ambulances, as I provided the chronological order of how we got here, these ambulances were not delivered until October 2024. That is 15 months after the contract was awarded. Imagine that. You hire someone to deliver an item, and after 15 months, those items were not delivered, no actions were taken, and we all have to ask ourselves why. Because during those intervening months, you will remember, we had serious challenges with the supply of ambulances as a matter of 5.53 million to over 16 million. But then, because the ambulances that came into the country were not fit for purpose, it meant that the supplier had to go and do further adjustments. And in doing the further adjustments, that cost you, the taxpayer, further expenditure. So whereas the ambulance was originally 1.295 million, they had to make further adjustments that cost you an additional $244,000. And what is curious about that further $244,000 is that the brand that was delivered, Force Traveler, and I invite any Tobagonian to go on this website, just as how you would go on Hyundai if you wanted to purchase a Hyundai or a Toyota. Go on the website of Force Traveler and put in a request for that ambulance, and what you would recognize in terms of the price, when you do the conversion, the price for that very same Force ambulance at the highest end is about $232,000 TT dollars. So the cost to retrofit that we are paying to retrofit the ambulance is actually the cost that if you were paying for that ambulance and ordering it online, that will be the cost. So we are not even talking about the 1.295 that we were actually charged. Just the cost to retrofit the ambulances would have gotten you that ambulance online. So we are now paying, in addition to the $1.3 million, we have to, because the ambulance they brought in was not fit for purpose, pay an additional $244,000. So you must remember, as I said, because I want you all to follow me, the ambulances that arrived were not the ones that were tendered for, approved, or paid for. It was a completely different make and model that appeared. And what makes it even worse, there is no public record of variation of the contract, no retendering, or lawful approvals. This is not incompetence. This is not deception. This is nothing short of procurement fraud. And the the procurement regulations are very clear in this matter, that in instances where a contract is to be varied or go out back for tender, there's a clear process. And in this instance, that process was not followed. So we must ask the questions: where was the oversight? And the answer lies in what I just explained to you regarding the responsibility of the secretary. The oversight responsibility ultimately rests with the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly. Under the laws I just quoted, the Regional Health Authority Act, the TRHA board must, not maybe, they must seek Executive Council approval before authorizing major expenditures of this nature. If that approval was not sought, then the law was broken. If it was sought and given, then the Executive Council is in fact complicit in this deception. The Executive Council is not a rubber stamp. It is the guardian of your money. It is the guardian of the Treasury. And it has a legal and fiduciary responsibility to protect the public purse. And you know what is disappointing to me? Just recently, at the last sitting, I raised this matter as a matter of question directly to the Chief Secretary, asking the Chief Secretary, like the rest of us in Tobago, whether he was concerned that this cost ballooned from $5.53 million to $16 million. And you know what the Chief Secretary told me? Well, he don't have that information, so basically he doesn't see anything to be worried about, concerned about, or to be investigated. And this is the same Chief Secretary that took a rope and tied himself to Watson Duke and walked all across Tobago complaining about a zip line which at that time the total project cost was $4 million. And here it is, we have a situation where public funds is expended on a contract that started at $5.53 million, escalating upwards to $17 million, and your Chief Secretary is saying to you he is not concerned. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is the Chief Secretary's role and what is the role of the Executive Council in this total fiasco? Brothers and sisters, at this point in time, where do we go from here? Because clearly we have a situation on our hands that is vexatious, it is scandalous, it is obnoxious, and it is appalling, where public funds, limited, every time you talk, and I'm sure every one of you can vouch, every time the first thing that comes out of a secretary's mouth is to remind you, the fellow Tobagonians, that they are limited. They have limited funds. They don't have enough money. And here it is, a situation where somebody or bodies are allegedly colluding to misappropriate public funds. So as the minority leader, I will not stand by idly, because I understand the pain, I understand the suffering that many Tobagonians are experiencing at this time, because the THA just is not able to treat with their challenges. So on this matter, based on some evidence I have of impropriety and malfeasance, I have penned a letter to the Anti-Corruption Investigative Bureau, ACIB, and I've also CC'd our Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Junior Benjamin, requesting a criminal investigation into the TRHA ambulance procurement scandal, dubbed Ambulance Gate. And I'll read to you the contents of that letter so that you will have an appreciation for the issues that we are treating with some substantive evidence, information. Dear Director, I write to formally request an invitation into serious and potentially criminal irregularities surrounding the Tobago Regional Health Authority's procurement of ambulance under tender number PMT01 2022 awarded to Biomedical Technologies Limited. The key issues to be investigated: the cost escalation, the original contract awarded in July 2023 for $5.535 million, final cost reportedly exceeding $17 million with no clear justification or public variation. Substitution of vehicles. Ambulance delivered were not the make and model approved in the original contract. This represents a fundamental breach of procurement integrity and could constitute fraud or misrepresentation. Lack of executive approval. Allegations indicate that the TRHA board may have executed or varied the contract without obtaining executive council approval as identified by the secretary based on her response to the question which was uploaded, contrary to requirements under the Regional Health Authorities Act, Chapter 2905. Neglect of oversight responsibilities. The Secretary of Health, although alerted to these irregularities, failed to act despite her obligations under Section 37(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Chapter 2503. In light of the above, I respectfully request that your office determine whether 1. Public funds were misappropriated, officers of the Tobago Regional Health Authority, including the board, breached their fiduciary duty, and 3. Any person or entity engaged in fraudulent or corrupt conduct during the procurement and execution of this contract. This is a matter of grave public concern and must be treated with the urgency and seriousness that it demands. So, at this point in time, the ball is in the court of the Tobago Regional Health Authority former board, because if what the secretary is saying is true, then the board has questions to answer that they awarded and proceeded with these variations without executive council approval, now costing you, the taxpayer, over $12 million in cost overruns. And if the secretary account is not true, then they owe it to themselves and to the rest of us to clear the air. And finally, I am calling on this matter, this scandalous, repugnant, and very alarming circumstances where a secretary would have presided over this matter, had many opportunities to treat with the oversight and the protection of the public interest, and failed, as in accordance with Section 37(1), to utilize her responsibility of direct control of the TRHA and the division. I am calling for the immediate resignation of the Secretary of Health on this matter, where $12 million in cost overruns, procuring ambulances after 2 years. After 2 years, we are in 2025, ambulance contract awarded in 2023, and up to now, we cannot see in rotation one of those ambulances, and the one that they attempted to put into rotation could not even power up a hill. Where are the ambulances? Where are our monies? This secretary needs to do the other honorable thing and resign. I thank you. And before I close, because I know the normal sympathizers, I want to say something to us all as Tobagonians, because we are Tobagonians first. And on this matter, we ought not to see party colors. We ought not to see blue, red, yellow, or green, or codes. This is a matter that affects every one of us. It treats with the lives of, it could be any one of us. It could be any one of us. And for those who I know probably busy saying the worst about me on social media at this time, I'm simply saying to you, the upholder is worse than the thief.
In terms of the Anti-Corruption Bureau letter that you penned, have you sent it already, and what is it in terms of the date? It's dated when?
So this letter is dated 3rd June 2025 and will be transmitted directly by hand. So this will be delivered by hand on Friday. I will share with the media when it is actually delivered. Of course, we are restricted in terms of this would have to be delivered directly in Trinidad, and therefore the most appropriate time available to me is on Friday. So I will share with the media when it's actually delivered. As I said, it will be accompanied by some additional documentation that we believe will aid the investigative authorities in their investigation. As a matter of fact, we are also calling on the Office of the Procurement Regulator, and that application will be dropped off before Friday. We are also reporting this matter to the OPR because this is a matter of clear procurement breach. Because I can tell you, as someone who worked in procurement previously, that at every stage of procurement, you start with where the subject matter expert, whether it is a department, so in this situation, it would have been the Tobago Emergency Management Department, they would say exactly what they want as ambulances. So they would send to you the specs. And after they send to you the specs, you ought to have now a procurement process that involves whether it's an RFP or an RFQ, request for proposal, or request for a quotation. Once those quotations come in, you would have an evaluation committee that would look at all the merits and demerits, the suitability, the track record, and the experience, even of the supplier. Because the question we all have to ask ourselves, we have not yet delved into the competence of this supplier to supply ambulances. Because my information is based on what is available. We have to ask the question whether this supplier has ever supplied ambulances before. I can tell you the previous process in Tobago that went seamlessly, and the same people are at TRHA, which is confusing to me. The same people who were so successful in bringing in ambulances in 2015, purchased directly out of Miami. Imagine one of those ambulances, the very old ambulances of 2015, had to rescue the new ambulance of 2025 because the one that came in 2025 could not go up John Dial Hill. So the old ambulance of 2015, which we paid, as a matter of fact, $535,000 for one, and those were Ford ambulances, and we all know the reliability of Ford, that brand. So we paid in 2015 $535,000, but in 2025 we are paying 3 times that cost for ambulances to which we cannot use. And the only difference between 2015 and now is that we changed administration. And that is why I am reiterating and reinforcing my call for the secretary to resign, because she is the outlier. That is the only thing that has changed between the procurement of 2015 to the procurement of 2025, that we have in 2025 a new secretary. The manager at Thames remains the same manager. The procurement people remains the same procurement people. But yet in 2025, we have this absolute disaster. Any questions? So I think it was quite comprehensive, and therefore I encourage each and every one of us to stay guarded. There's more to come. There's more to come, because as I told you, the Tobago Regional Health Authority at this time is a graveyard for corruption. As a matter of fact, they are currently operating without a board. This is a situation we have experienced before under this administration. You will recall we had to bring a motion to really speed them up, hasten their footsteps in terms of implementing a board. And they are now without a board, managed by something called an oversight committee that has absolutely no grounding in law, and therefore that again presents us with a whole heap of legal impediments, because my understanding is that oversight committee continues to function as if they are a board, and that is illegal. That is again absolutely wrong. Thank you and have a blessed day. Okay, sure. Appreciate it.
Where are you? All right, come in now.
This is for me.
How are you doing?